The crisp, heavy paper of the first-class ticket felt cool and solid in Dominic Sinclair's hand, a stark contrast to the boiling indignation simmering just beneath his calm exterior. He stood before a gate agent whose smile was as thin and artificial as the plastic name tag pinned to her chest, Brenda. In that moment, he wasn't the CEO of Nexus Dynamics, a titan of the tech industry worth billions. He was just a black man in a tailored suit being told his ticket. His reality was a lie. She looked right through him, her eyes scanning the waiting area for someone she deemed more first-class material. Little did she know, her simple, prejudiced assumption was about to ground more than just one passenger. It was about to ground an entire global airline. John F. Kennedy International Airport was a symphony of controlled chaos, a river of humanity flowing through gleaming terminals. For Dominic Sinclair, it was merely a transition point, a brief pause between a successful negotiation in New York and a vital board meeting in London. At 42, he had cultivated an aura of serene authority. He didn't need to be loud to be heard. His presence was a quiet testament to a life of relentless work, sharp intellect, and overcoming obstacles far greater than a delayed flight. His suit was a bespoke piece from Savile Row, his watch a Patek Philippe Calatrava, not for flash but for its engineering perfection. These were tools of his trade, armor for a world that still, too often, judged a book by its cover. He approached the priority boarding lane for Global Horizon Airlines, flight GH782 to Heathrow. The line was short, a handful of business travelers checking phones, and a wealthy-looking older couple chatting softly. At the podium stood the gate agent, Brenda Jenkins. She was a woman who seemed permanently soured, as if she'd been steeping in a brew of minor grievances her entire career. She processed the older couple with a practiced, saccharine smile. Then it was Dominic's turn. He placed his passport and first-class ticket on the counter. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice a calm baritone. Brenda glanced at the ticket, then at his face, and then back at the ticket. A flicker of something, confusion, suspicion, crossed her features. She picked up the ticket as if it might be a forgery. "One moment, sir," she said, her tone suddenly clipped and devoid of the warmth she'd shown the previous passengers. She typed furiously into her terminal, her brow furrowed. Dominic waited patiently. Airport systems had glitches. It was a fact of life. He'd built his entire empire, Nexus Dynamics, on creating flawless logistical software that eliminated such glitches for global shipping, finance, and ironically, several major airlines. Brenda hummed, a sound pregnant with accusation. "I'm having trouble validating this ticket." "Is there a problem with the system?" Dominic asked, keeping his voice level. "The system is fine, sir," she replied, her eyes not meeting his. She was looking at his suit, his watch, as if trying to solve a puzzle that didn't add up in her mind. "This seat 2A is showing as unassigned in our system. Are you sure you completed the purchase?" The question was a carefully polished insult. "I am quite sure," Dominic said, a hint of steel entering his tone. "The confirmation email arrived yesterday, and the funds were debited from my corporate account. Perhaps you could try scanning the QR code again?" She scanned it again, ostentatiously. The scanner beeped affirmatively, but she ignored it. "No, it's still not right. I'm sorry, but there's a discrepancy. I can't let you board." A man in a rumpled suit behind Dominic huffed impatiently. "Can we get this moving?" Brenda gave the man an apologetic glance before turning her cold focus back to Dominic. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step to the side. We need to keep the line moving for our other first-class passengers." The phrase "other first-class passengers" hung in the air, a clear implication that he was not one of them. It was a subtle, yet deeply cutting, distinction. Dominic felt the familiar sting of it, an old wound that never quite healed. He had chaired meetings that shifted global markets. He had dined with presidents, yet here in the anonymous hustle of JFK, he was being reduced to a potential fraud by a gate agent with a chip on her shoulder. He did not raise his voice. He did not cause a scene. He simply held her gaze. "I've paid for seat 2A. I have the receipt, the confirmation, and the ticket. I am a paying customer, and I expect to board this flight." "And I expect you to step aside," she snapped, her professional veneer cracking to reveal the raw prejudice beneath. We have procedures for this sort of thing. This sort of thing, Dominic repeated softly, letting the words hang between them. He knew exactly what she meant. And as he stepped aside, not in defeat, but to recalibrate, he understood that this was no longer about a simple ticketing error. This had become a matter of principle. And Brenda Jenkins had just made the colossal mistake of challenging a man who didn't just play the game. He had designed the board it was played on. Dominic stood near the customer service desk, a pillar of calm amidst the swirling currents of boarding passengers. He watched as the rest of the first-class cabin, a collection of faces he might have recognized from the pages of the Wall Street Journal, were waved through with smiles and pleasantries. Each one felt like a small, personal slight. He pulled out his phone, not to rage tweet, but to pull up the email confirmation again, complete with a transaction ID and a receipt that could have purchased a decent used car. Brenda, meanwhile, was basking in the glow of her perceived authority. After a few minutes, she called over a supervisor, a portly man named Robert Peterson, whose tie was too tight and whose expression was one of perpetual weariness. He looked like a man whose primary job was to make problems go away with as little effort as possible. Brenda spoke to him in a low, conspiratorial whisper, gesturing towards Dominic. Her body language was a masterclass in insinuation. She shrugged, shook her head, and pointed at her screen. Robert listened, nodding gravely, not once looking over at Dominic to get his side of the story. The verdict was decided before the trial had even begun. Robert waddled over, his face set in a mask of practiced, insincere sympathy. "Sir, Mr. Sinclair, is it?" he began, not waiting for a confirmation. "Brenda tells me we have a bit of a ticketing issue." "There is no issue with my ticket," Dominic stated plainly. "There appears to be an issue with your employee's ability or willingness to verify it." He held out his phone. "Here is the confirmation from Global Horizon's own system." Robert gave the phone a cursory glance, not even pretending to read the details. "I understand, sir, but our internal system, the one we have to trust, is telling us something different. It says the transaction was flagged and voided." This was a new and blatant lie. Dominic's company, Nexus Dynamics, designed fraud detection algorithms for financial institutions. He knew for a fact that a voided transaction of this magnitude would trigger an immediate, automated alert to his phone. There had been none. "That's interesting," Dominic said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Because my bank, JP Morgan Chase, seems to think the transaction was perfectly valid. I could call my private banker right now, but I suspect that would be a waste of his time and mine. The problem isn't with my bank. It's here, at this gate." Robert's face hardened. He was used to dealing with irate customers, but he wasn't used to this quiet, unshakable certainty. It unnerved him. He fell back on the corporate playbook. "Look, sir, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you used a fraudulent third-party site. Maybe there was a computer glitch on your end. Whatever the reason, Seat 2A is not available to you. I can try to book you on a later flight, in economy," he added as if offering a generous concession. The public humiliation was now complete. Passengers in the economy line were beginning to stare, their curiosity piqued by the sight of a well-dressed black man being argued with by two airline employees. Whispers started to ripple through the crowd. Dominic could feel their eyes on him, their snap judgments forming in the vacuum of information. He was no longer a person. He was a spectacle. "Let me be perfectly clear," Dominic said, his gaze fixed on Robert, but his voice carrying enough for those nearby to hear. "I am not interested in a later flight. I am not interested in an economy seat. I am interested in the first-class seat that I purchased. I am asking you as the supervisor to do your job and resolve this." Robert puffed out his chest, his authority now directly challenged. "My job is to follow procedure, and procedure says you don't have a valid ticket. Now you can either accept the economy seat on the next flight, or we can refund your original purchase price. That's the final offer." "There is a third option," Dominic suggested. "You could manually check the payment records, call your ticketing department, and discover that you are making a grave error." "We don't have time for that," Robert said dismissively. "The flight is about to close. It's time for you to make a decision." The finality in his tone, the sheer, unadulterated refusal to even consider he might be wrong, was the final straw. Dominic had offered them every chance to rectify their mistake quietly and professionally. They had not only refused, they had doubled down on their prejudice, wrapped it in corporate policy, and presented it as non-negotiable. "I see," Dominic said softly. He took a slow breath, the picture of composure. But inside, a switch had been flipped. The time for discussion was over. The time for consequences had begun. "You've made your decision," Dominic continued, his eyes locking with Robert's. "Now I'll make mine." He turned away from the counter, pulling his phone from his pocket. He didn't walk away in a huff. He simply moved a few feet to the side, his back to them, and scrolled through his contacts. Robert and Brenda exchanged a smug look, assuming he was calling a lawyer or a customer service line that would lead to a dead end. They believed they had won. They had no idea they were witnessing the beginning of the end for Global Horizon Airlines as they knew it. Dominic Sinclair's contact list was a curated collection of some of the most powerful people in technology, finance, and politics. But the name he selected was not a lawyer or a media mogul. It was one that wouldn't mean anything to the people at the gate: Arthur Chen, his chief technology officer. Arthur was a prodigy, a caffeine-fueled genius who viewed the world in streams of code and data. He and Dominic had built Nexus Dynamics from a garage startup into a global behemoth. Their bond was forged in all-night coding sessions and billion-dollar deals. They had a level of trust that transcended normal corporate hierarchies. They also had contingencies, fail-safes, and protocols for every imaginable crisis. And for an unimaginable one, they had Protocol Zero. The phone rang once. "Arthur," Dominic said, his voice as calm as if he were asking for the time. "Dominic, you're supposed to be in the air. Everything all right?" Arthur's voice was sharp, analytical. "There's been a service failure," Dominic said, using their carefully chosen, anodyne language, "with a client, Global Horizon Airlines." There was a pause. Arthur understood the nuance. Dominic never called him about minor issues. Service failure was code. "How significant?" Arthur asked. Dominic looked over his shoulder at the gate, at Brenda laughing with another agent, at Robert Peterson strutting with the self-importance of a man who had successfully squashed a minor rebellion. He saw the doors to the jet bridge closing. Flight GH782 was gone. "Category 1, Dominic said. It was their highest level, reserved for a fundamental breach of contract and ethics. Arthur Zen went silent for a beat. He knew what that meant. Protocol Zero had never been used. It was a theoretical nuclear option, a dead man's switch built into the very core of the software systems they leased to their most vital clients. It was designed for a catastrophic scenario, like a client refusing to pay a 9-figure bill or attempting a hostile takeover. It was never intended to be used for a personal slight. But what Dominic had just experienced wasn't just personal. It was a symptom of a corporate culture so rotten that it allowed prejudice to override basic business sense. It was a systemic failure, and Dominic decided it required a systemic response. "Are you certain, Dominic?" Arthur's voice was low. He was asking for final confirmation. Invoking Protocol Zero would have massive, irreversible consequences. It was a declaration of war. "Initiate Protocol Zero," Dominic commanded, his voice unwavering. "Effective immediately. All services, Global Horizon Airlines, worldwide." "Understood," Arthur replied. There was no hesitation. He trusted Dominic's judgment implicitly. "Executing now. Estimated time to full cascade, 90 seconds. I'll handle the legal fallout. You might want to find a comfortable seat." The line went dead. Dominic slipped his phone back into his pocket. He walked over to a seat in the now quiet boarding area, directly opposite the Global Horizon gate. He sat down, crossed his legs, and picked up a discarded copy of the Financial Times. To any observer, he looked like a man who had simply missed his flight. But as he stared blankly at the stock market listings, he wasn't reading. He was counting. 10 seconds. In a climate-controlled server farm in Austin, Texas, Arthur Chen typed a single command line into a master terminal, a string of encrypted characters. He hit enter. The system asked for a biometric scan and a voice print confirmation. He complied. The system accepted. The process was initiated. 30 seconds. The first domino fell. The Odyssey system, the bespoke software suite that Nexus Dynamics provided to Global Horizon, began to desynchronize. Odyssey wasn't just a booking program, it was the airline's central nervous system. It managed everything: ticketing, gate assignments, crew scheduling, baggage handling, fuel logistics, maintenance reports, weight and balance calculations for every flight, and even the in-flight entertainment. 60 seconds. At gate C26, where Brenda was preening, her terminal screen suddenly flickered. A blue error box appeared. Terminal offline, network connection severed. She tried to reboot. Nothing. The large departure screen above the gate went blank, then flashed a single ominous message in red. System-wide error. 70 seconds. A pilot in the cockpit of a 787 preparing for takeoff in Dubai found his flight plan had vanished from his electronic flight bag. The digital load sheet, which told him the plane's weight and balance, was gone. The plane was blind. He couldn't legally take off. 80 seconds. In the Global Horizon baggage handling facility under Zurich, the automated conveyor belts ground to a halt. Thousands of bags were instantly stranded. In the London control tower, every Global Horizon flight plan suddenly vanished from the air traffic controller's screens. 90 seconds. The cascade was complete. Globally, every single digital touchpoint of Global Horizon Airlines went dead. The website crashed, displaying a 404 error. The mobile app wouldn't load. The check-in kiosks were frozen. The phones at their call centers went silent. Every single Global Horizon plane on the ground was now indefinitely grounded. Every plane in the air was now flying on backup systems, unable to communicate with the company's network. From his seat, Dominic heard the first signs of the chaos he had unleashed. A confused murmur rippled through the terminal. Another gate agent's screen went blank. Then another. Phones came out as people tried to check the airline's app. A wave of confusion turned into a tide of frustration. Brenda and Robert were now frantically trying their radios, getting only static. They looked around, their faces paling as they realized this was bigger than just their gate. The entire terminal was descending into chaos. Robert's eyes darted around the terminal and finally landed on Dominic Sinclair, who was sitting perfectly still, calmly turning a page of the newspaper. A sickening knot of dread began to form in the pit of Robert's stomach. It was impossible. It had to be a coincidence. But he had a horrifying feeling that it wasn't. The chaos did not erupt. It seeped. It started as confusion, a collective digital hiccup that spread like a virus through the veins of Global Horizon's worldwide operations. At JFK, Brenda Jenkins' smugness had evaporated, replaced by a sheen of panicked sweat. "It's a system-wide outage," she yelled to Robert Peterson over the growing din of angry passengers. Robert was jabbing at his dead tablet, his face the color of spoiled milk. All around them, the airline's infrastructure was dissolving. The glowing blue signs flickered and died. The automated announcements fell silent. They were an island of incompetence in a sea of technological failure. In the Global Horizon Operations Control Center in Dallas, a state-of-the-art room known as the Bridge, a dozen highly paid technicians stared at a wall of dead screens. The massive board that tracked all 600 of their aircraft across the globe was a uniform, terrifying black. "What is it? A power failure?" yelled the shift supervisor. "No, sir, the power's on. The network is gone," a young tech stammered. "It's not that we can't connect to our servers. It's like our servers don't exist anymore." The company's chief information officer, a man named David Miller, was patched in via his personal cell phone, his voice tinny with panic. "Is it a hack? Ransomware? What are we seeing?" "Worse," the lead network engineer said, his voice grim. "It's not an attack from the outside. The system is actively deconstructing itself from the inside. It's like every line of code is being remotely, surgically erased. Our backups are being wiped simultaneously. This isn't a hack, it's a demolition." Meanwhile, the real-world consequences were piling up with catastrophic speed. A flight from Tokyo to Los Angeles, halfway across the Pacific, suddenly lost its primary satellite communication link to the airline. They were still in contact with air traffic control, but they were cut off from their own company, unable to receive weather updates or rerouting instructions. In Frankfurt, a fleet of catering trucks sat idle. unable to receive the digital manifest telling them which planes to service. A team of mechanics in Singapore couldn't access the maintenance logs for a plane that needed an urgent engine check, grounding the 300-passenger aircraft indefinitely. The entire logistical chain, a marvel of modern engineering, had been shattered. The financial bleeding began instantly. Every minute a plane sat on the tarmac cost the company thousands of dollars in crew salaries, gate fees, and lost revenue. With over 400 planes now grounded, the losses were escalating into the millions per hour. The phones at travel agencies were lighting up as panicked passengers tried to rebook on other airlines. The name Global Horizon was, in the space of minutes, becoming synonymous with disaster. Back at JFK, Dominic Sinclair lowered his newspaper. The symphony was in full crescendo. He could hear snippets of conversation from frantic travelers. They're saying every flight is canceled. Not delayed, canceled. The website, the app, nothing works. It's like the company just vanished. I have a connecting flight to my daughter's wedding. Robert Peterson was now screaming into his personal cell phone, trying to get answers from a regional manager who was just as clueless as he was. His eyes kept flicking back to Dominic, the calm center of the storm he had created. The seed of suspicion in Robert's mind had sprouted into a horrifying tree of realization. He saw Dominic's expensive suit, his composed demeanor, his quiet confidence, not as the affectations of a fraud, but as the hallmarks of genuine power, the kind of power that could do this. He hung up his phone and walked slowly, hesitantly, towards Dominic. His earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by a dawning, sickening terror. "You," Robert said, his voice barely a whisper. Did you do this?" Dominic folded his newspaper neatly and placed it on the empty seat beside him. He looked up at the supervisor, his expression unreadable. "Doing is an active verb," Dominic said, his voice calm and precise. "It implies effort. I made a phone call. What you are witnessing is simply the cessation of a service for which your company was, until about 15 minutes ago, a paying subscriber." Robert stared, his mouth agape. He couldn't comprehend the scale of it. "What service? What are you talking about?" "Nexus Dynamics," Dominic said, letting the name settle in the air. "Perhaps you've heard of it. We design, build, and maintain integrated logistics platforms. We are the architects of the Odyssey system, the system that, for all intents and purposes, is Global Horizon's operational nervous system." The color drained completely from Robert's face. He stumbled back a step. He was a mid-level manager, a corporate lifer. He knew the name Nexus Dynamics. They were the invisible giant whose technology powered everything. He had sat through presentations praising the flawless efficiency of the Odyssey system, and he had just told its CEO to get lost. Brenda, drawn by the strange confrontation, came closer. "What's he saying, Rob? What's going on?" Robert couldn't speak. He could only point a trembling finger at Dominic. He had tried to swat a fly and had brought down a dragon. This wasn't just a career-ending mistake. This was a company-ending mistake, and he was standing at ground zero. The news traveled up the corporate food chain at the speed of light. Low-level managers called regional directors, who called vice presidents, who called the C-suite. The message was the same at every level. We're blind. We're dead in the water. It's a total blackout. In the gleaming 80th floor penthouse office of Global Horizon Tower in Chicago, CEO Christopher Walton was in the middle of a quarterly earnings call with investors. He was a man accustomed to control, a silver-haired executive who radiated ruthless efficiency. "And so, with our aggressive expansion into the Asian market, we project a 12% growth in Q4, he was saying when his chief of staff burst into the room without knocking. A violation of protocol so severe it was almost unthinkable. "Sir, you need to see this," the aide said, his face ashen, holding up a tablet. Walton, annoyed at the interruption, waved him off. "I'm on a call with Wall Street, Michael. It can wait." "Sir, with all due respect, Wall Street is about to be the least of your problems," Michael insisted, pushing the tablet in front of him. The tablet showed the after-hours stock ticker for Global Horizon, GHA. It was plummeting, a sheer vertical drop of 15%, 20%, 25% in a matter of minutes as news of the worldwide cancellations hit the wire services. Walton's blood ran cold. He abruptly ended the call, stammering a weak excuse. What in God's name is happening? A full system collapse, Michael said. Everything. Ticketing, logistics, comms. It's all gone. Our CIO says it's not a hack. He says it's like someone just turned us off. Walton stared at him, uncomprehending. Turned us off? What does that even mean? Who has that power? The answer came from the frantic CIO on the speakerphone. Nexus Dynamics, sir. It has to be them. The Odyssey system. It's the only thing that integrates everything. They must have activated some kind of kill switch. Walton felt a surge of fury. Get their CEO on the phone. Now! What is this? Some kind of shakedown? Are they trying to renegotiate our contract? I'll have our lawyers bury them. We're trying, sir, Michael said, his voice strained. Every number we have for them goes to a generic voicemail. Their legal department isn't answering. It's like they've ghosted us. The gears in Walton's mind were spinning furiously. This couldn't be random. Nexus Dynamics was a top-tier partner. Their relationship was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They wouldn't just pull the plug without a reason. There had to be a trigger, a cause. I want a full, immediate report, Walton commanded, his voice shaking with rage. Every single interaction between any Global Horizon employee and any Nexus Dynamics employee in the last 48 hours. Every email, every phone call, every technical support ticket. I want to know who lit this fuse. An army of analysts and internal affairs officers was mobilized. They began frantically combing through digital logs, searching for the inciting incident. For an hour, they found nothing, just standard operational communications. Then a junior analyst in the customer relations department had a thought. The search was too narrow. What if the interaction wasn't with a Nexus Dynamics employee, but with a Nexus Dynamics executive traveling as a passenger? It was a long shot, but they were desperate. He cross-referenced the Nexus Dynamics executive board list with passenger manifests from the last 24 hours. He got a hit. Dominic Sinclair, CEO, booked on flight GH782, JFK to Heathrow, seat 2A. The analyst then pulled the gate logs and incident reports for that flight. His eyes widened. He stood up from his desk so quickly his chair flew back. He sprinted down the hall to the emergency conference room where Walton and the other executives were gathered. Sir, I found it, he gasped, breathless. JFK, flight 782 to London, about 2 hours ago. He laid the report on the table. It was a standard customer dispute summary filed by Supervisor Robert Peterson. It detailed an encounter with a passenger named Dominic Sinclair, who was belligerent and presenting a fraudulent-looking ticket. It concluded with, passenger was denied boarding. He became agitated and made vague threats before leaving the gate area. Recommend placing this individual on the no-fly list. The room fell into a stunned, tomb-like silence. Christopher Walton read the name Dominic Sinclair and then looked at the title next to it on the other report. CEO, Nexus Dynamics. The two pieces of information clicked together in his brain with the force of a physical blow. He felt the air leave his lungs. His multi-billion-dollar, globe-spanning airline had not been brought down by a sophisticated cyber attack or a rival corporation or a catastrophic system failure. It had been brought down by a gate agent named Brenda Jenkins and a supervisor named Robert Peterson at JFK because they didn't believe a black man could be flying first class. Walton slowly sank into his chair. The fury was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow dread. This was a disaster of such epic, self-inflicted proportions that there was no playbook for it. He hadn't just lost control of his company, he had become a laughingstock. Get me the jet, Walton whispered, his voice hoarse. Get me to New York, now, and find out where Dominic Sinclair is. Find him, and for God's sake, somebody get that man a cup of coffee, the most expensive damn coffee you can find. While the corporate behemoth of Global Horizon was thrashing in its death throes, life at Gate C-26 had ground to a halt. The angry mob of passengers had been redirected by overwhelmed airport staff, leaving a vacuum of stunned silence around the non-functional Global Horizon desk. Brenda Jenkins was sitting on a stool, staring into space. The reality of the situation was too vast for her to fully grasp. She understood that the system was down. She understood that the man she had dismissed was somehow connected. But her mind, conditioned by years of petty power and ingrained prejudice, couldn't make the leap to the truth. She kept muttering, "It can't be him. It's just some kind of crazy coincidence." Robert Peterson knew better. He was a creature of the corporate world, and he understood chains of cause and effect. He was replaying every second of his interaction with Dominic Sinclair, and each memory was a fresh stab of regret. The condescending tone he had used, the dismissive wave of his hand, the threat of calling security. He had treated a king like a peasant, and now the king had burned his village to the ground. His phone rang. The caller ID read HQ, C. Walton. His blood turned to ice. It was the CEO. He had never spoken directly to the CEO in his entire 15-year career. He answered with a trembling hand. "Pete Peterson." "Robert," Walton's voice was eerily calm, a quiet deadliness that was far more terrifying than shouting. "I'm looking at your incident report from Flight 782, about a Mr. Dominic Sinclair." "Sir, I can explain," Robert stammered. "No, you can't," Walton cut him off. "But you are going to listen. In approximately 45 minutes, my jet will land at JFK. I am coming to that gate, and you and your colleague, Ms. Jenkins, will be there. You will not leave. You will not talk to anyone else. You will simply wait. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir," Robert whispered. "One more thing, Robert," Walton said, his voice dropping even lower. "Is Mr. Sinclair still there?" Robert's eyes darted over to where Dominic was still sitting, now browsing on his phone as if he were simply waiting for a friend. "Yes, sir, he's here." "Good," Walton said. "Do not approach him. Do not speak to him. Do not even look in his direction. You have done enough damage for one lifetime." The line went dead. Robert felt a wave of nausea. He looked at Brenda, who was watching him with wide, fearful eyes. "The CEO is coming," Robert said, his voice hollow. "Here, to this gate." Brenda's delusion finally shattered. The CEO of a global airline did not fly to a specific gate to deal with a system outage. He flew there to deal with the person who caused it. The man she had sneered at, the man she had accused of fraud, was someone so important, so powerful, that the CEO himself was coming to beg for forgiveness. Her entire worldview crumbled in that instant. Her sense of superiority, her confidence in her own judgment, her belief in the order of things. It all turned to dust. She wasn't an enforcer of rules. She was a fool who had kicked a hornet's nest the size of a planet. A wave of pure, undiluted terror washed over her. She started to tremble. Dominic, for his part, was handling business. He had approved a press release from Nexus Dynamics, a simple, factual statement. "Due to a material breach of our service agreement, Nexus Dynamics has suspended all services provided to Global Horizon Airlines. Effective immediately, we are monitoring the situation and will act in the best interests of our stakeholders." It was corporate, sterile, and devastating. He saw the fear on Robert's and Brenda's faces, but he felt no satisfaction, only a profound sense of exhaustion. This shouldn't have been necessary. He had just wanted to get to his meeting. He had just wanted to be treated with the basic dignity afforded to any other customer. Their small, ugly prejudice had forced his hand, and the result was this multi-billion-dollar fiasco. He watched as a team of high-level airport executives descended on the gate. They weren't there to fix the computers. They were there to contain a VIP situation. One of them, a woman in a sharp suit, approached Dominic cautiously. "Mr. Sinclair?" she said respectfully. "I'm Amelia Grant, the airport's director of operations. We've been asked by Mr. Walton's office to extend every possible courtesy. We have a private executive suite ready for you. Whatever you need, food, drink, a secure line, it's yours." Dominic considered it for a moment. He could leave the scene of the crime, so to speak. He could wait in luxurious comfort. But he knew it was important that he stay. It was important that Walton and Robert and Brenda see him right here, in the place where the disrespect had occurred. The reckoning needed to happen on this ground. "Thank you, Ms. Grant, but I am comfortable here," Dominic said politely. "I'll wait." His quiet refusal was a power move more potent than any demand. He wasn't their guest. He was their judge. And court was about to be in session. Christopher Walton arrived not like a CEO, but like a general inspecting a lost battlefield. He was flanked by two grim-faced lawyers and his chief of staff. Their power walk through the terminal, parting the crowds like a ship's bow through water. When he saw gate C-26, he paused. The scene was surreal, a multi-million-dollar corporate hub rendered inert, two terrified employees standing like statues, and one man sitting calmly, holding the fate of his entire company in the palm of his hand. Walton instructed his entourage to stay back. This had to be done by him, and him alone. He smoothed his tie, took a deep breath, and approached Dominic Sinclair. He had prepared a dozen strategies on the flight over: legal threats, financial offers, appeals to common sense. But seeing Dominic's cool, impassive face, he knew that none of them would work. This required something he was not used to giving: total, unconditional surrender. "Mr. Sinclair," Walton began, his voice hoarse, "I am Christopher Walton, CEO of Global Horizon Airlines." Dominic looked up from his phone, his expression neutral. He did not stand. He simply nodded. "Mr. Walton, I was wondering when you'd arrive." The lack of deference was unnerving. I can't begin to express how profoundly sorry I am for what has happened here today," Walton stammered. "It is an unacceptable, inexcusable failure on every level. There is no excuse for the treatment you received." "And yet, it happened," Dominic replied, his voice soft but carrying immense weight. "And your supervisor, Mr. Peterson, filed a report recommending I be placed on a no-fly list. So it seems your company's official position was that I was the problem." Walton flinched as if struck. "That report, those employees, their actions do not represent the values of Global Horizon." "They are the face of Global Horizon," Dominic countered. "They are your ambassadors. And today their message was quite clear. My money is welcome, but my presence is suspect." They looked at me and saw a threat, not a customer. "Tell me, Mr. Walton, is this the standard training your employees receive?" This was the heart of the matter. It wasn't just about him. It was about the system that allowed this to happen. "No, of course not," Walton said quickly. "It's a failure of our training, a failure of our culture, a failure I intend to rectify personally, which is why I am here. I am prepared to do whatever it takes to make this right." He gestured vaguely. "A full refund, of course. A lifetime of free first-class travel on any flight, anywhere in the world. A significant donation to a charity of your choice." Dominic held up a hand, cutting him off. "Mr. Walton, you seem to be under the impression that this is a negotiation, that I'm a disgruntled customer looking for compensation. You need to understand something. I am not your customer anymore. As of 2 hours ago, you are my client, a client in catastrophic breach of our service agreement." He finally stood up, and for the first time, Walton felt the full force of his presence. Dominic was not just a wealthy man. He was a builder, a creator, and Walton was a man who had broken one of his creations. "Your airline is not flying because my company, the company I built from the ground up, has turned it off," Dominic stated, his voice ablaze. "And the only person on this planet who can turn it back on is me. So let's dispense with the talk of free flights and talk about the terms of my company's continued service." Walton swallowed hard. This was it. The price. "Name them." "Term 1, Dominic began, ticking a finger in the air. "You will issue a public, unreserved apology. It will not be a vague corporate statement about a service disruption. It will state plainly that a senior executive was subjected to racial bias by your staff, leading to a fundamental breakdown in our business relationship. It will be on the front page of your website and sent to every major news outlet." Walton's lawyers shifted uneasily. Admitting fault so publicly was a legal nightmare. Walton silenced them with a glare. "Done. Term 2, you will fire Robert Peterson and Brenda Jenkins. Not a suspension, not a transfer. Termination. Effective immediately. Their severance will be nothing more than what is legally required." Over by the desk, Brenda let out a small, choked sob. Robert just stared at the floor, his face a mask of defeat. "Done," Walton said without hesitation. "Term 3. This is the most important one. This cannot happen again. You will retain an independent diversity and inclusion consultancy, which my team will select and you will pay for, to completely overhaul your corporate training from the ground up. Every single employee, from the baggage handlers to the board of directors, including yourself, will undergo mandatory, rigorous, and ongoing anti-bias and cultural competency training. Nexus Dynamics will have auditing oversight on this program for the next 5 years. If you fail to meet the benchmarks we set, our service contract is permanently voided. This was the masterstroke. It wasn't about punishment, it was about reform. He was using his immense leverage to force genuine, systemic change. And finally, as Dominic said, for the quantifiable damages and the breach of trust, Global Horizon will pay a penalty to Nexus Dynamics. Let's call it a reintegration fee. That fee will be $100 million. My company will then donate that entire sum to a newly created foundation dedicated to funding STEM scholarships and executive mentorship for minority students. You will not get a tax write-off for it. Walton didn't even blink. $100 million was a fraction of what he was losing. Every day the airline was grounded. It was a bargain. Agreed, Walton said, to all of it. We will have our legal team draft the agreement immediately. My legal team already has, Dominic said, tapping his phone. It's in your general counsel's inbox right now. You have 1 hour to sign it. Once I receive confirmation of the signature and the termination of your 2 employees, I will make another call. Your systems should be back online within 5 minutes of that. He looked past Walton to where Robert and Brenda stood, broken. He felt no triumph, only a grim sense of necessity. Then he looked back at the CEO. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Walton. With that, Dominic Sinclair turned and walked towards the executive lounge Ms. Grant had offered him earlier. He didn't look back. The deal was done. The consequences were delivered. Now all that was left was the karma. The restoration of Global Horizon's network was as swift and surgical as its demise. One call from Dominic to Arthur Chen. Arthur, resume service. And the digital heart of the airline began to beat again. Screens flickered to life. Systems rebooted. Flights began the slow, arduous process of rescheduling. The immediate crisis was over, but the fallout was just beginning. For Global Horizon Airlines, the price was staggering. The stock had lost 35% of its value, erasing billions in market capitalization. The direct cost of the 18-hour shutdown, rerouting passengers, overtime pay, airport fees, and lawsuits climbed to over $500 million. The $100 million reintegration fee was just salt in the wound. But the real damage was to their reputation. The story, led by Dominic's mandated public apology, went viral. Global Horizon became the global poster child for corporate prejudice. They were forced to enact the sweeping changes Dominic demanded, and while the airline eventually recovered, it operated forever under the shadow of the JFK incident, a cautionary tale taught in business schools for decades to come. Christopher Walton kept his job, but his legacy was forever tarnished. For Dominic Sinclair, the event became a defining moment. He was lauded in the media not for his retribution, but for the constructive way he wielded his power. He hadn't just punished a company, he had forced it to become better. The Nexus Foundation for Future Leaders became a powerhouse for change, launching the careers of hundreds of brilliant young minds who might otherwise have been overlooked. Nexus Dynamics itself saw its stock soar, its reputation as an indispensable, ruthlessly efficient operator cemented in the minds of the corporate world. Dominic never flew Global Horizon again, but he had single-handedly made it a safer, more equitable airline for everyone else. But true karma is personal, and its most potent effects were reserved for the 2 individuals who started it all. For Brenda Jenkins, the fall was swift and brutal. Fired for cause, she was blacklisted from the airline industry. No major carrier would touch her. Her name was toxic. The union couldn't protect her from a blunder of this magnitude. She ended up working a series of minimum wage jobs, first in retail, then as a cashier at a dingy 24-hour diner. She became bitter and resentful, forever telling anyone who would listen that she was the victim, that she was just following procedure. She never once acknowledged the prejudice that drove her actions. Her karma wasn't just the loss of her career, it was being trapped forever in a prison of her own ignorance, unable to learn, unable to grow, and unable to understand why her life had fallen apart. The fate of Robert Peterson was, in many ways, more tragic. As a supervisor, His professional network was wider, and he initially believed he could weather the storm. He was wrong. His name was now inextricably linked to one of the most infamous corporate blunders in history. At every job interview, the question would inevitably come up. He would try to spin it, to downplay his role, but the facts were a matter of public record. No company wanted a manager with such catastrophic judgment. After a year of rejections, his savings ran dry. His wife, tired of the shame and the financial strain, left him. He had to sell their large suburban house and move into a small, rundown apartment. He lost his C-suite friends, his golf club membership, his sense of identity. His karma was the slow, agonizing stripping away of every trapping of the corporate success he had prized above all else. He had stood by a policy born of prejudice to avoid a small scene, and in doing so, he had authored his own complete and total ruin. He was a ghost in a suit, a walking reminder that the system you uphold so blindly can be the very one that grinds you to dust. He wasn't just fired, he was erased. So there you have it. A story that began with a single ugly moment of prejudice and ended with a global corporation brought to its knees. It's a stark reminder that in our interconnected world, the actions of one person can have consequences that ripple across the globe. Dominic Sinclair didn't seek revenge, he demanded accountability. He used his incredible power not just to right a personal wrong, but to force an entire system to confront its own failings. The story of Brenda Jenkins and Robert Peterson serves as a powerful lesson in karma. The arrogance and intolerance you put out into the world will inevitably find its way back to you, often with devastating interest. True power isn't about looking down on others. It's about having the strength and wisdom to lift them up. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories of justice and karma. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us about a time you witnessed someone underestimate the wrong person. Thank you for listening.